Goblins. Dwarf-sized creatures with pointy ears and big, mischievous grins. Are these things even real? I mean, this feels so much like a fantasy. Humans have basically discarded these magical creatures as that. But what if someone in 2016 told you they've encountered them? Would you believe? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and hide your gold. Because they are greedy. But in this case, that may be your credit card. The Tree Goblin. I have many stories, too many to count, really. This story happened when I was around 6 years old and was my first encounter with the paranormal in 1994. My father would take me to visit my uncle in Fort Keep on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation at their father's house-a-nothing town, which he lived outside of as a kid. The place just gives off feelings of hopelessness and sorrow. Even just driving past it, I felt this when I was a child. The area of his homestead had no houses around it for miles, just trees and hills. They would drink coffee and talk for hours. On this occasion, I was playing in front of my uncle's deck and ramp. He was in a wheelchair. I remember just digging in the dirt, being a kid, finding a silver dollar in the ground, when I had the sudden feeling I was being watched. I ignored it for a few moments when I looked south. Not too far off, I'd say 40 to 50 yards away, was a tree, the closest tree to the house. I could see the left side of this tree was completely vertical, right as rain, but the right side wasn't. I could see a figure peeking from around the tree. The thing is, it had the same color as the bark of the dead tree. It looked one with it, never moving once. Its fingers were wrapped around the trunk, long and pointed head, egg-shaped eyes, huge and hollow. Its mouth had a smile, unlike anything I'd yet to see. It was staring at me. Imagine the scariest part of the scariest movie you've ever seen. I couldn't move, complete paralysis. It must have been a whole minute. Whatever it was, I knew I was aware of it. My thought was, I wonder how fast it is. Then something snapped. I ran as fast as my legs would take me up to the stairs inside. My father and his brother were at the kitchen table. I told my dad, panicked, to hurry quick, come outside, there's something watching me. I grabbed his hand and led him to the spot I was at and said, "Look." But when I pointed at the tree, I could see that it was a normal tree now, both sides vertical. I couldn't speak. I felt very silly for a moment, but I knew what I saw was real. All my dad said was, "Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. It's okay," and led me inside. My father and I are Native American, and I guess we're both blessed with gifts we didn't want. As I grew older, he told me more and more about what he was able to see. He told me such outlandish things in such an honest way that I knew he couldn't be lying. Things he saw on the same land I saw that goblin, the land he grew up on. If you guys like this story, I'll post another experience. If not, I'll leave it at that. Also, if anyone wants to take a guess on whatever it was I saw, be my guest. I don't feel the need to proclaim, this is true, this is true. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't, and I'm glad this site exists. Thanks. Shadow Goblins. I've always been fascinated with the paranormal, and I've been looking at this site for a while. I just thought I would post a story that happened to me when I was in middle school. Maybe someone can shed some light on what it may have been. I do have an overactive imagination, but I always try to find a reasonable explanation for odd and creepy experiences first. This one, I'm just stumped on. Around 10 p.m., I was lying in my bed because it was a school night. Sometimes I just laid in there and stared at the ceiling or looked at things in my room for a while before drifting off to sleep. It's hard to explain, but to me, in the dark, things kind of look pixelated, like on a computer screen. Out of the dark, I started to see little shadows. They were each about a foot tall maybe, no real features, just outlines of shadows. I know it sounds silly, but they were in the shape of little cartoonish goblins. Can't remember exactly why, but they reminded me something in the Disney cartoon Fantasia. They started out of nowhere and moved from the foot of my bed to my face and then disappeared behind me. I laid there for a few minutes in awe and half thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. After a few minutes, it started to scare me. I ran out into the hall, turned on the light, and yelled for my mom. The shadows disappeared when I hit the light. I told her what had happened, and she told me to quit being silly and go back to bed. Sometime later, I saw them again. I did the same thing, ran into the hall, and they disappeared in the light. I again told my mother and got the same reply. I remember it happened at least one more time, but the last time it was different. When I ran into the hall and turned on the light, they were still there. I still saw them as shadows, and they still came towards me and disappeared behind me. I yelled for my mom, and she still told me I was being silly and that my eyes were playing tricks on me, even though I told her that I was still seeing them right that minute in the light. She sent me back to bed, still seeing them. I eventually drifted off to sleep because I had no other choice. I never saw them again after that. I'd just like to know if anyone has heard of anything like this. Was it my eyes or my imagination or something else? I've had other experiences, but I've always been interested in paranormal things. I've always kind of had a good knack of scaring myself over nothing, though. Although I should know that at this time I was into witchcraft with some friends. I don't know if it has anything to do with this or not. Although other things that happened at that time, I credit them to being young and in a group of girls and scaring the crap out of each other. The shadow goblins, however, I just don't understand. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. Thanks for reading. Black creature. I've been struggling with what I saw and whether or not to share. Part of me wants to know if I'm not alone in my experience, and the other part wants to believe it was just my imagination and I shouldn't attempt to learn more. On the grand scale of experiences, this probably won't be that interesting to some people, but I'm afraid because of it, and that is what has led me to share. 2 nights ago, I was in my apartment with my 1-year-old son. His dad was working the night shift, and at 1 a.m., I don't know the exact time this happened, but I think it was between 2 to 4 in the morning. We have a king-size bed, and our son fell asleep with me, so I let him stay there. At some point, I woke up to the baby rolling around the bed and kicking me. At the time, I didn't know what his problem was, but he was keeping me awake. This lasted for a while because usually when my son sleeps next to me, he doesn't move so much, and I figured he'd eventually be still. He didn't though. He kept moving around half asleep, and I was worried that he'd roll off the bed. I felt like this went on for at least 30 minutes, if not longer, and I got frustrated that I was awake, so I decided to move him to his playpen in the living room. I laid him down and then went to the bathroom. From the bathroom, I could still see the living room, and I should also mention that even at night it is not completely dark in our apartment, so you can still see fairly well. As I was peeing, I looked over to where the playpen is just for the few seconds, and I saw some kind of creature. It was all black and hunched over like it was hiding behind the playpen, but not very well. The playpen is made with see-through netting anyway, so you can see right through it. This thing had long arms, and my memory says it was slightly muscular on its upper body. What struck me as off about the whole thing was that it had long pointy ears, like an elf but bigger. What the fuck? I finished my business and walked to the living room and nothing is out there. So I walk into the bedroom with the image of this thing lingering in the front of my head. I try to discount it or come up with an explanation, but I don't have one. I know it's natural for people to see faces or human shapes, but this thing was not human looking, and I've never seen anything like it. There's no reason my brain would just make up this thing while I'm trying to go to the bathroom, and I'm worried about my son. I ended up grabbing the baby, and he slept with me anyways. I wasn't going to take any chances. The next morning, he was sick with a cold, so I'm guessing that's why he was so uncomfortable. But it's been a couple days now, and I can't shake off what happened. If I had to give this thing a name, I would say it resembled a large goblin. It also had a larger than human-sized head. I posted this in another sub earlier if it looks familiar. I guess I'm looking for some input or some kind of advice. Do I pretend nothing happened? How do I protect my family if this thing was something paranormal and it comes back? I've had a few unexplained experiences in my lifetime, but never anything like this in my own home. This whole thing has me very worried. Thanks for reading.